Hey everyone, welcome to Hot Seat episode number 4 on Crushing Classical, Redefining a Thriving Classical Music Career. On the show today, we have Jennifer Freed, a freelance horn player in the Boston area. Jennifer has been thinking for a long time about bringing her skills as a musician into the corporate world. She comes to this hot seat with several ideas and is unsure how and where to start. As you listen to this interview, I invite you to map what you hear onto your own situation. Though you may not be interested in doing exactly what Jennifer is doing, there is a lot of advice here that you can apply to yourself, including brand building, how to use stumbling blocks and obstacles to your advantage, and how to generate mass interest in your ideas. Let's get started. Hey Eileen, hey Jennifer, how are you guys? Welcome to the hot seat.
Hey there.
Hello.
Hey.
All right, so here we go. We're going to dive in. Jennifer, so I know a little bit about you, but can you just tell us who you are, where you live, what you do, that sort of thing, and, kind of the dilemma that you're in. Everybody who comes on a hot seat has some kind of a dilemma that they're experiencing. So if you can give us some background on that, that'd be great.
Sure. So I actually met Tracy back in Chicago during civic time. I was
wow.
Yeah, way back. Well, we'll say only a little bit far back. We're very young.
Just a couple years ago.
Exactly. So I'm a freelance horn player in the Boston area. I left Chicago because I had triplets. They are now 12. So I love freelancing. I'm growing a little weary of private teaching. And I kind of am getting the itch to do something a little bit more with my brain power. So I'm interested in some sort of hybrid between the creative side of music making and something totally outside of my wheelhouse, like consulting. So I wasn't thinking so much nonprofit consulting, because of course I think there's more transferables there, but listening to your podcast, I was wondering if I wanted to get into something corporate. How do you even begin to transition into that kind of career, with a music background? Because I think we have a lot of transferable skills. In fact, I think we'd be valuable assets in a lot of industries, but I guess if you can't represent it on paper or you don't know the right folks, it would be hard to even know what route to go. So I'm kind of investigating this as either a side hustle or maybe a future endeavor for myself. I'm lucky because when my kids all head off to school or wherever they head, I'll be turning 47. So if I wanted to, I could have an entire 25 year career entirely if I wanted to do something else. So I've been thinking about it.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, that's good. That makes sense. So, and how long have you been thinking about doing this?
Maybe the last 2 years. I've met more friends that are non-musicians, and I've been just intrigued by their world.
Okay. And can you give me an example of some of the people you know that are non-musicians and the kind of stuff they're doing?
I know a fair number of people in HR, in medical devices, and in IT specifically. I do have one friend that I have gotten a lot of good advice from. She really thinks that there is a need in nonprofit management. She sees these organizations as having great vision, but not a great way to deliver it. So she thinks that would be a great fit for me. I wasn't necessarily thinking that, but I'm not ruling it out.
Okay.
Yeah.
So one thing that comes to mind is, I know you said that you're not necessarily interested in nonprofit consulting. And you said, I'm not thinking of nonprofit consulting. And so when you said that, did you mean that you're not thinking of joining a nonprofit that does corporate consulting work? Is that what you mean by that?
I was not thinking of myself as a person who would serve on a consulting team for a nonprofit group.
I see.
Even though that would make the most sense, I'm really interested in this entirely other planet of like the corporate world, the for-profit world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so what do you, let me dive more into I think you probably have some philosophy here. So, because, the only way that you would say to yourself, I want to do a hybrid of the creative side of music making and consulting. You obviously see some kind of bridge there. So can you talk more about what your philosophy is and what you think the creative side brings to the corporate world or the for-profit world that, maybe you haven't? And again, I'm not looking for perfection here. I'm just looking for your philosophy.
Sure. I guess I'll tackle it kind of from the personal side first.
Okay.
So definitely have always loved music making, no doubt. But I've always had my own sort of volunteer side hustle. So in undergrad, I did like the arts leadership program, and I was like class president. And I've always served on volunteer boards. Like right now, there's a local community orchestra, and I'm on their advisory board. So I've always enjoyed the planning, creative visioning side of things. I've just always done it as a volunteer. As a musician, I like to have my hands really dirty. So when there are committees, I like to sign up. If there's problems to be solved, I like to jump in. I just find, and I think for a lot of the reasons that you guys have been exploring in this series, we haven't yet in our industry gotten to the point where all of these meetings and ideas and projects are yielding real change. So I'd like a chance to kind of itch my brain side of me, that creative side, the non-artistic playing side, I guess, in a way that I would feel like I was actually making a little bit more of a difference, and that I was valued because I had this kooky background. So, I think I would imagine, this is my guessing, that if you're putting together a team, let's say to go evaluate a company, you definitely need people that understand business practices. You definitely need people that understand the technology side. Those are things that I would need some education in for sure. But I do think that there is a piece that tech and business heavy groups are missing, and it is a more global, long-term, big picture, like almost devoid of the minutia that I think the artistic brain can bring.
Okay. I'm taking notes while you're talking, just so I don't miss anything. Okay, so if you're so let's say that, I'll use your example. So let's say that you're on a team that's going in to evaluate a company. So like a consulting team, I'm assuming is what you're saying.
Exactly.
So you're going to evaluate a company. What do you think that your perspective tangibly brings, like in a tangent, like I'm looking for tangible here, because the thing about for-profit is they tend to respond to and listen to tangibles.
Sure.
So what do you think, can you give me like a scenario? Could you play one out? Just trying to see what it looks like,
Yeah, I guess what came across my mind first was, if you have all tech and business brains trying to solve a tech and business problem, there actually is room for a different kind of brain in finding your solution. Because if all you're thinking about is the tech side, or all you're thinking about is the business side, there is a customer experience. There is an outward, I'll say outward beauty, but sort of a creativity component. And I think that people who are artistic can help in better communication, maybe deeper communication. So that would be one thing a music person could bring to a consulting team. I also think that we actually have, I guess, as a population, we have a lot of skills that if we were to write them down are extremely valuable. So I think most musicians, especially those who freelance, they're actually pretty good at research. They figured out who to talk to, where to play, even down to how to manage their own studio businesses, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think this outside viewpoint is important because I think if you're in tech, for example, it's hard after a few years to not think like a techie.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I feel like that's where the niche is, and that's what I'm curious about. So this outside viewpoint without a personal stake in, the company itself. You know what I mean? I think that part of the team would be useful. And again, I'm not a business person, which is why I thought this would be kind of an interesting hot seat, because how would one go from, performing to corporate America if that was what they wanted to do? You know what I mean? And I think it's leveraging that we have an experience and a viewpoint that the client doesn't have and that the typical corporate team doesn't have. So perhaps it wouldn't be, and I don't know how companies work. So maybe it's not a full-time thing, but maybe you're your own agent and they know that when they need this kind of angle or they think this angle would be useful for a project, they know you're the person, to kind of bridge several different worlds, the one that you are going to be consulting for, the company you're consulting with, and then, the angle you bring from, your artistic experience.
Okay. So one of the things that I recommend doing, because this is it's a fairly new idea and obviously you're still trying to figure out what legs it has, right?
Yes.
I recommend creating a public figure page. So your name and then giving I'm going to call it your initiative, a name. And then writing, blogging about it, writing about it, making comments about it. In other words, creating a brand for yourself, creating yourself as a brand, forwarding this idea.
Okay.
And the reason why I say that is because anymore, how people, this is how we're shopping now. This is how we make decisions now. We don't, when you hear about, I'll just use this as an example, when you hear about, a really great bakery, the first place you go to find out about the bakery is you either go to Yelp if it's local, or you go to Facebook, or you go to Instagram, or maybe even Pinterest. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
So the first place. So if you, let's say you decide to go to consulting firms, because you can work on selling this idea to consulting firms, but the first thing they're going to want to do is look you up. That's the first thing that companies do is they look you up to see what have you published, what have you written, do you have a body of work? Having some kind of a personal brand is a really smart thing to do if you're looking to move into something new.
Okay, great. Even if it's just the process of learning the new industry.
As a matter of fact, that's the best time to post about it, is when it's new.
Okay.
That's the best time to post about it. In fact, one of Tracy's good friends he wants to get into the teardrop trailer business. Like he wants to build teardrop trailers.
Okay.
And he said, he's like, well, and I talked to him the other day and he was like, well, I'm just building my first one and I'm still gathering the materials and I'm like, yeah, you should post about that. You should post the process of getting the materials together for the first one, and then document the process of building that teardrop trailer, like on your profile or on a public figure page. Why? Because first of all, you're generating interest. People love to watch things being built, being created. People love to watch that. But also, you're also cultivating a group of, you're cultivating an audience and someone who's probably eventually going to buy that trailer because they saw the process and the love that went into that, building that first trailer.
Got you. How do corporations shop for these kinds of services? Because, I mean, I'm just thinking a bakery is one thing, but...
I don't think they shop. They're probably not shopping for these services. What they're doing is they are looking, consulting companies or consulting firms are looking for consultants all the time. They're looking for good consultants. And so you would be one of the people they would interview. So you'd have to create, if in other words, if you want some kind of a job or if you want some, even if it's a contract position, it doesn't matter. You'd want to create a resume that outlines both your artistic ability, but also, any business education that you decide to get for yourself. Certainly your Facebook page should be on there. You should have a LinkedIn profile for sure for this kind of a role. You should spruce up your LinkedIn profile without a doubt for something like this. Mm-hmm.
Now, in my mind, there's sort of two avenues. One is you gain experience through jobs with a variety of companies. So
right.
Ones that you have personal relationships with, for example. The other prong would be getting a formal education, be it an MBA or I can't think of anything more useful than an MBA, but that's just my mind. I don't know.
An MBA is not necessary for this.
Okay. That's good to know.
Yeah, it's not necessary for this. People always think that, getting a degree is going to somehow give them credibility. But the truth is what you publish and what comes out of your mouth is what gives you credibility.
Gotcha. So so part of it is documenting the process in an interesting way online.
Mm-hmm.
So that when people go to look me up, they can see the process and they'll have more information about me. I'll establish a body of work through things that I write.
Right.
Definitely working with individual relationships that I have just to see what avenues are out there already.
Yes.
Is this the kind of thing that you would go to a headhunter to? Is it, different communities have... it's almost like we have one here called Leadership Seacoast, where you can sign up and they take people from all different kinds of industries and you learn about the other industries, you make connections, kind of cross-pollinating. And the reason behind it is that all the people that go are interested in being more involved in the community they're in right now. Mm-hmm. So it sort of serves a larger purpose. Does that take the goal too far off in a direction it doesn't need to go in, or is that type of thing useful?
I think it's useful, and I'll tell you, I think going and talking to a headhunter is a great idea. I think I don't know if a headhunter and a recruiter are exactly the same thing, but a recruiter, a headhunter, people like that would be great. Talking to, if you have connections to companies and you can get a meeting with somebody who, like maybe they use consultants and you can get a meeting with them and say, hey, listen, this is my idea. This is, I would love to contribute. Would you let me go, with your consulting team to see what I can offer? Like, I don't know what it looks like, but would you let me go with your consulting team one time? You know what I mean? Like, it's almost like a police ride along. I hate to use that as an example, but you know what I mean?
Shadow. Yeah.
Yeah. Like a shadow. And so I would do that. The one thing I'll say to you is be careful not to lose your fire for this idea, because you are going to run into people who go, yeah, this is not going to work. And yeah, this is a dumb idea. You might run into a headhunter who can't make sense of what you're saying. And so they're going to downplay it and tell you it's a bad idea. Don't be deterred by people who are going to tell you things like that. It's going to happen, just so you know. People are going to down your idea. It's going to happen.
Okay.
It's going to happen. I mean, look, if I don't know how many people Tracy told about. Initially it was Hornwise and then it became Crushing Classical. I don't think we ever talked about this, but I don't know how many people Tracy talked to about Crushing Classical, but I would bet you that if she had told 50 of her friends and or family and or colleagues about Crushing Classical, at least 25 of them would have said, yeah, that's probably not going to work.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because people do that. And Tracy, we never even talked about this. Did that ever happen?
Well, I think mostly people just didn't know what I was talking about. Or they'd be like,
and that's exactly what you're going to run into, Jennifer, is that they're because you're still trying to language it, which is fine. You're still trying to language it. So because when people don't understand something, they go, oh, that's not going to work.
Yeah, I've gotten basically 2 responses pretty much across the board. And it's either I can 1,000,000% see you doing that. You'd be so great. Or you don't even know anything about that. Like, how do you even think you can do that? So
right.
I definitely see what you're saying.
Yeah, they're going to down you. And this is the other thing. There's nothing wrong with going into a corporation and going, I don't know what I'm doing. Here's what I know. I have this commitment. I have this intention, and I don't know what I'm doing. So I want to see if this can be executed. Is this viable? Does this work? I don't know. And are you willing to explore this with me? Like, be willing to be vulnerable that way.
Sure. And is there a certain way I would go about connecting with people that I don't know in the, would it be more the headhunters or more consulting firms directly, or?
I like the idea of you going through headhunters because they can probably get you meetings you couldn't otherwise get.
Sure.
So I like that idea. Yes, you can go to firms directly, but it's so much easier to work through someone who can get you a meeting.
Yeah, gotcha.
So much easier. And by the way, you could, you said some HR people. That might be valuable because if there's any place that, HR knows what's being hired in the company. So they know. That's what I like about the HR angle, because they know what needs to be hired in the company. They've always got their finger. Obviously, they have the finger on the pulse of behavior issues in a company because that's what HR is. But they also have their finger on the pulse of what hiring they are doing or not doing.
Yeah, and these, the couple people I know that are doing HR right now have been very useful in catching me up on how to make myself look good on a page in corporate.
Even better.
Because obviously my list of orchestras, and major horn teachers is not going to cut it.
Right.
You know what I mean?
File under, what is that? Huh? Like they don't even know. Right?
Yeah.
That makes sense.
I guess that's where my biggest fear would be that there is a language of corporateness that I don't know because I've been so steeped in being a performer for so long. Is there, what places does your run-of-the-mill musician go to kind of learn about a new land per se?
Well, there's one thing you want to think about where that's concerned, because it's interesting you talk about that. So what you're kind of referring to there is what I'm going to call corporate jargon. They have a jargon that they use, just like musicians have a jargon, right?
Sure.
So one thing that's kind of interesting about you and something to remember whenever you're going into, maybe an area you don't know very well, is you can take a position about that. You could take a position that says that, you're not going to be fearful of the jargon. You're going to be, the problem actually is your jargon. So in other words, the reason why corporations have the problems they do and the struggles they do is because of jargon. The reason why I am such a great solution for you is because I don't speak that language. I speak street language.
Yeah.
Like what normal people talk about, not in corporate world. And so that, that's part of what makes me, so you use it as a selling point instead of being afraid of it.
Sure. Okay. Gotcha. So
reposition it. Yeah. And
Yes.
reframe it for yourself, and also in your, when you're pitching yourself, if you will.
Gotcha. So the stumbling blocks can actually be written about and addressed in
Yes.
some of the body of work along the process.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Exactly.
All right. This is definitely more empowering. So, what I like about it is there doesn't have to be by the end of the week, I need X number of pieces of writing. It can actually go along nicely with what I'm already doing in performing and momming. I can sort of start to build, and it will come, as I put each piece into place. But there doesn't have to be a sprint to the audition or a sprint to graduation like in other areas. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, totally. And I recommend getting this quote unquote on the court sooner than later, meaning get, when you take those meetings, when you're about to go in and talk to a headhunter, and remember to document it, get on video and say, so I'm about to walk into this headhunter, and this is what I'm taking in, this is my idea, and I'm going to let you know what happens in other words, document the process as you go along, and your thoughts that you're having, before the meeting, and after the meeting. Get the way this will come alive or become something for you is by being in conversation about it. And I mean, being in conversation with HR people, getting meetings that you have no idea what the outcome is going to be. You have to be willing, in order to do this, you have to be willing to not know what the outcome is going to be. And that's what stops everybody from doing something they don't know how to do.
Yes, I think this is where musicians are strong, though, because we never know the outcome, because the piece is never, ever really finished. The work is never done.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the asset, is we have to be unflappable by nature, because it's always evolving.
It's always evolving, and classical musicians have a drawback because they want everything to be perfect. So oftentimes they're not going to show you the stuff that isn't working, whatever, until they're done practicing and they feel like it's perfect enough for the world to see. And that could be a tendency of yours. Like, I'm not going to go into these meetings until I know exactly what I'm going to say and I know it's going to turn out well. You actually have to be willing to go into meetings and have them turn out badly and learn.
Sure.
And
yeah,
that's,
absolutely.
you know what I mean? And that's something classical musicians just don't like very much.
Well, sure. Absolutely. Yeah, that is spot on.
So that's what I would say. I mean, I think there's two sides to it. I think there's never being finished is a strength, but wanting it to be perfect is a weakness.
Sure.
And so just remember that as you're going, be willing to put yourself through the meat grinder to figure out how to find your place in this world. This way, in this for-profit world, because you are carving out something that is brand new right now, but may become the norm in the future.
Gotcha. And that in and of itself, the process, it's like you don't need to be worried about people lifting the idea, because it's so new. By the time people might be replicating it, per se, you would be so far into your process, you would be 10 branches down the road on your adventure, if you want to look at it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because we're kind of experiencing this a little bit right now at Crushing Classical. When we started this last year, it was very sparse. Like the people that were in this space, if you will, there were a few of them, but there weren't very many. Now suddenly people are starting to show up, and it's really interesting how that is, how it's sort of shaking out. Everyone's doing something a little bit different, but everybody's got the same idea of, we need to, classical music needs to forward itself, if you will. I'm not really sure. You know what I'm saying? It needs to forward itself. And so there's this initial, like, we were there last year, but now it seems like the conversation is starting to catch fire. Like, we're starting to see a flame on the match, whereas before all we saw was smoke. You know what I mean?
Well, people that are interested have found you.
That's right.
It takes a certain amount of time to be found, that's for sure.
And that's why I'm telling you this, because believe it or not, there is interest in your idea, but they just haven't found you. And that's why you have to make yourself found. That's why you have to create a brand and a public figure page. Like, you want to create a conversation, because listen, people are having conversations about this, I can assure you, but there's nobody leading the conversation for it.
Sure.
All we said was at Crushing Classical is we want to be the lead. We want to lead the conversation for it. That's all we said. And so now, so it's not that the conversation didn't exist. It's that there wasn't a central location where it was happening. That's what your opportunity is. I don't know if you get that. That's really what your opportunity is to be the hub where the conversation is happening.
Yeah, so from my angle, it would be exploring the bridge between a life in the arts and, I guess, life in the mainstream or life in corporate America, something along that line.
Yeah, and I think also what unique, as you said earlier, contribution somebody who has lived a life in the arts can bring to the for-profit world that has yet to be discovered, that has not been utilized, that is not, like, it's almost like the softer side of Sears, if you will. I know I'm using really stupid analogies today.
No, but it makes sense. And what's interesting to me also is I always have these thoughts of how people in music feel about those who have a quote unquote day job. Mm-hmm. There's definitely a stigma that I have never been into that, because I think everybody does different things. But also that, so when parents send their kids to music school, they're like, well, what's your backup? What's your backup? And this actually kind of goes to say you don't need a backup, because everybody's creating their jobs, as the world is sort of changing and everything is a la carte, more than it used to be. Like, everybody used to go to a building and come home and stay with one company for their entire lives, or build a life with one orchestra for their whole life. Like, people move around a lot. They do a lot of different kinds of jobs. So it actually is completely wrong. There's no backup job. It is just jobs that musicians find that are interesting to them, so they're really, I guess I was thinking, oh, well, I don't have an MBA. Like, I know I have these skills, but no one is going to know I have these skills because I'm quote unquote just a musician. Right. But I guess it doesn't really look that way if you can present it in a really open and detailed way.
Yeah, I think so. And the other thing I would tell you is there are different aspects of corporate America that, like, there's certain topics that you'll want to write about or address. And by the way, you can as far as learning about the corporate world or learning about the business world, this is the great thing about Google. There's so much you can look up. But there's, for example, and you can look this up on Google, but there are different, there's customer service, customer satisfaction, customer experience. Those are aspects of corporate America that they're trying to improve. There's productivity in the workplace. I'm just giving you big topics that corporations care about. There's employee satisfaction and happiness. There's this thing called, you've probably heard of it, work-life balance.
Yes. Okay.
There's this thing called leadership. So leadership initiatives in companies. There's also there's all these big, inside of every, niche, if you will, there are big topics. Kind of like in health and fitness, there's fat loss is a huge topic. Muscle hypertrophy, which means growing and gaining muscle. That's a big topic. Dieting is a big topic. Just dieting in general, what your diet is a big topic. Injury is a huge topic in health and fitness. Supplementation is a huge topic. And so every niche has big topics. And so what I recommend you do as far as creating a body of work is learning about these bigger categories that are in business that consultants tend to go in and deal with, and begin to write about that from the perspective of where you come from.
Sure. Now, how much citation do I need to do on these pieces? They
Zero.
can be, I mean, I'll do my homework, but they can just be shoot from the hip kinds of things.
Well, it's really about what you're really presenting is your philosophy. It's not about presenting truth. It's about presenting your truth.
Gotcha.
Really important to distinguish that. There are facts. You know, I'm sitting in a chair right now as a fact. I'm wearing shorts and a short sleeve shirt as a fact. There's a fan on the floor in front of me. Those are facts. So those are also, that would be considered true. But everything else what you're putting forward is your truth or your view. That's really what people want. They don't want to hear facts. They can read numerous articles on what quote unquote works in productivity. What we want to know, if we're following you, is what's your view on that?
Gotcha. Okay.
So citation is not necessary. It's not necessary at all. It's your willingness to put forward your truth and stand on a wall about it.
Sure.
That's what makes people follow you.
Okay. All right. Wow, this has taken me like totally for a different turn, because I was thinking like, well, re-education, and then how am I going to do that and play at the same time? But this actually works more cohesively than I was even thinking, which is really exciting to me.
Yeah, and I think it's a great idea, and it's a new idea, and just like I said, don't let anybody discourage you. It's very easy when somebody doesn't understand something for them to trash it. Don't let that bother you. Don't be deterred by someone's. I don't care how many degrees they have and how smart they think they are. There is room for this, and I'm sure that there are people that are looking for this or interested in this, and it's just nobody has decided to stake a claim on it to lead the conversation about it. And that's the opportunity you have.
Gotcha. That's really cool. I like how open-ended it is.
Yep. And by the way, feel free to post in, I don't know if you're in the group Classical Cats. We have a Facebook group. Okay. So in that group, feel free to open conversations in there, because I would love to know what you decide to name your page, or if you have ideas and you need to bounce them off of us, please go in that group, and I'm happy to interact with you about that. Because what you decide to name your page is actually important. Yeah, you can name it your name, but I would love to see, your name and then whatever the name of your movement is.
Yeah, that would make much more sense, because then people would be able to find it.
Exactly. Yeah. So, we're happy to comment on it and give you ideas, and kind of, I wish people use the group more, because I like give away advice for free all the time in there. So feel free to post in there and tell us what you're doing, what you're naming your page, kind of what, and if you get confused, stuck, or whatever, please use that group, because that's what it's for us to have conversations about how are you creating your career, whatever that looks like.
Excellent. So really, in terms of my next step, it's, setting up the theme page, just as you said, but also, basically trying to just carve out time, a certain amount of time, each week to devote to building this, writing the pieces, so much reaching out or reading, that kind of stuff, and just integrating that into my weekly practice. And over time, that'll build, and things will come from that. So
there's that. So put up a public figure page. We can help you come up with the name for that. Then identify those big categories. I gave you a bunch of them, but some of the big categories that are in business that is being talked about, published about, the problems. Like what are companies hiring consultants for? Like what are the problems they're hiring consultants for? So then you get educated, and that's what's so great about Google, is you can find all that information. And then pick one topic that you want to write about. just pick your first topic that you want to do an article about, or that you want to do a post about on your Facebook page. And that's all you really need to start out is, what am I going to write about first? Which topic am I going to write about first?
Gotcha. And you go piece by piece,
Yeah.
research your article, write it, post it. Okay.
Yep. And if you have questions about that, like if you're thinking, come into the group and say, hey, Eileen and Tracy, I'm thinking about writing an article about productivity. This is what I'm thinking about doing with it, or this is the angle I think I'm going to take. And I'm happy to help you sort of strategize that and sort of poke holes in what you're thinking about posting to help you think, like how am I going to position this so that I'm taking a position, because that's the most important thing about having a public figure page is taking a position.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's why people will come to read you. I mean, that's why my husband and I are big fans of the podcast, because we get a lot of great ideas out of each one. So,
yeah, awesome. Definitely.
Yeah, you definitely have an angle, and we really like that.
And Tracy, do you have anything you want to add to this? I'm sure you do. I don't want to drown you out. So is there anything you want to say?
Yeah, I do. I didn't want to interrupt because everything you were saying was so great. I didn't want to interrupt the flow. But what I find so exciting about this is that you could really be the go-to person as we get to see what you build for yourself. The other people that end up following you and following in your footsteps, people that have thought that there might be a connection in the corporate world to, or, some value to what a classical musician could bring to it. I hear that all the time about corporate people saying that classical musicians bring a different thing to the table, not necessarily in the way that you're saying it, but I remember a long time ago, my band director in grade school, his wife was also a musician, but she ended up going off to work for IBM because there was something, she wasn't a business person. She must have had some computer savvy or something, but like there was some people would say, oh, that's because she's so detail oriented, or because she's a musician, this or that and the other. I'm sure everyone's heard people say things like that. So what's exciting is that you'll be leading kind of like Dailene said, like a movement where people can look to you and say, oh, well, she did it. That's what's exciting about it to me, is that you can simultaneously build something for yourself and make another thing possible for other people at the same time.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought of that part of it. And that's what I'm loving about this, is that I don't have to start at established, which is kind of what I was thinking, is I had to get all this stuff, be established, and then start. It's more like I can go and start with my zero, and I broadcast my zero bit by bit as it grows, numerically into knowledge and connections and paid work and that kind of thing.
Believe me, I thought I had to know everything about podcasting before I started a podcast. you know.
That's true. And what I always tell people is there's nothing like the, and this is a, kind of a terrible analogy, but it's a good analogy at the same time. There's nothing like watching the 300-pound person go down to 150 pounds. There's nothing like it. People would rather watch on Facebook or social media, whatever. They would rather watch the 300-pound person's workouts every single day for 3 years down to 150 than watch the 150-pound person go down to 120.
Sure.
And that's what you have to remember about this, is they actually don't want to see you at your best. They'd rather, because you give people permission to start.
Yeah.
You're willing to share your process and all of your foul ups and everything that doesn't work about it, and even the things that do. Your willingness to share that is what is going to endear people to you.
Gotcha. All right.
That's what people love the most. And also, let's just be honest about something real quick, because I just want to speak to something Tracy said. People are genuinely fascinated by classical musicians.
Yeah.
They're genuinely, because they think, and I'm not saying this is wrong, but they think we are unbelievably smart, unbelievably disciplined, They think we're nuts. They think really, but in a good way. And you should really take advantage of that. You should really capitalize on what people believe about classical musicians. You really should. Like, you're a fool if you don't. Anyone who's listening to this, you're a fool if you're not capitalizing on being a classical musician, because people think you're a unicorn, and you should take advantage of that.
Agree. I mean, I was even just thinking, like, we run our own mini businesses in all of these lesson studios and these little camps that we run and all of that kind of stuff. I mean, there are many people that, even if they worked for 12 years, couldn't run a week-long string camp, for example. And we literally do it without even blinking.
Yeah, without even blinking. No, we're going to put together a thing, and we're going to just sell it, and people are going to come. And that's another thing, too, is, how many people do you know, really, in life? How many people do you know who are willing to bust their ass on something for like 2 to 3 hours a day? That's what musicians do. Or 4 hours or whatever, 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours at night, whatever. How many people do you know in life, real normal people, who are willing to spend 3 hours on anything besides watching TV during the day?
Yeah.
Nobody. And that's why everybody thinks classical musicians are unicorns, because we have a discipline. I still have this discipline today. It's never gone away, even though I don't play anymore. I'm no less the same person I was growing up. You should capitalize on what people think about you, because there is a belief about classical musicians in this world, and you should, wear it proudly. Wear it, because, people think it, let them think it. I don't think they're wrong. I'm just saying, I think it's a little inflated. I think it's a little out of proportion what they think, because we're normal, lazy, procrastinating human beings. We all are. Let's be honest. You know what I mean? We all are, but there is a unicorn slant to being a classical musician. I'm just saying, take advantage of it.
Sure. Yeah, and that is part of this interest for me, is that I know there's something there, and that seems exciting to me.
It is. I love the idea. I think it's great. And like I said, don't let anybody talk you out of it. It's very easy to take one negative comment and go, I suck. And then all of a sudden you can't, you're talking yourself out of it. Is so easy when you hear negative feedback, or, to talk yourself out of an idea. Just whenever that happens, you should come in the group so we can, give you a clean diaper and you can go back out into the world.
That's hilarious.
You know what I mean? Like, that's what you should count on us for that, because if there's anyone who's going to champion what you want to do, it's us.
Well, that's amazing, and I'm really glad for that. And I will say, the audition process, I guess, does give us some dust them off,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's true.
Tracy's laughing. She knows all about
dust
that.
them off. I like the dust them off thing. Like, it's so toddlerish, There's
only two ways to go. You either go mental, or you're like, all right, next.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, or you go mental for like 24 hours and then you go next.
That's usually what happens. Usually. I'm never taking another audition again.
Yeah, I know. Right?
Yeah.
Totally. So anyway, please definitely check in with us. I mean, we'd love to know what you're doing. Again, Classical Cats, please go to that group and, ask us questions. Like we'd love to help you. We'd love to help you get where you want to go.
Yeah. And anyone who's listening who hasn't joined the group yet, just request it and I'll add you to the group immediately. Or as soon as I see the notification, I'll add you. Perfect. Awesome. Thanks.
Awesome. So that's it.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Jennifer. Thanks for coming on, and thanks, Eileen, for everything you said. I'm really looking forward to seeing where Jennifer goes with this. This is great.
Me too.
And I've really liked seeing how Crushing Classical has exploded for you. It's super cool.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Bye.
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 Thank you for listening today. Hey, listen, I have a huge favor to ask you, and it will only take a few seconds. If you like this show, one way that you can let us know is by writing a review on iTunes and subscribing to the podcast. Writing a review will help other people to find the podcast and help us immensely. It will only take a few minutes. Just head over to iTunes and search for Crushing Classical. There, you can write a review and click subscribe. Thanks again.